The topic that we have next is, for those who have been in the room before, we had a very, very technical topic, API security, very important one. Now the topic is, I would say, no less important. It is about the human in the loop, human-centric security. And with this, I would like to welcome on stage Cornelia. Please give her an applause. Cornelia is working at Switch and does a very important job there for increasing the awareness and bringing the human into the loop. Thank you. The stage is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and hello everyone. First of all, how are we feeling? Just a quick test on energy. Can you feel the oxygen coming in? Can you feel it? We've got the air on, and this is the last talk before the last coffee break. So I'll try really hard to make this as entertaining as possible. Also, another side note, because beforehand we had a very technical talk and the room was crowded, and then as I was approaching the stage, I thought, of course, this is typical cybersecurity conference. I want to talk about people, about humans, and people go like, oh, okay, humans, we just, ignore this risk and walk out of the door. But no, I'm actually quite happy and surprised to see so many of you, so many faces. And I would like to invite you to start off with a little game. So, I've got a set of questions, and I was going to do a Mentimeter, but it's much easier if you just answer to yourselves, and either you can write it down or just make a mental note, just yes or no on all those 5 questions. I'm not going to read them out because you can just read them. And SAT stands for Security Awareness Training. Okay, are we good? I think people maybe need more time. Okay, good to go? All right, just a quick introduction where I'm coming from. So I represent Switch. We're the National Research and Education Network for Switzerland. We also have the Switch Cert, one of the national certs. We defend higher education, but also energy, logistics. We have clients in the energy logistics sector and banking and finance. And we also run the top-level domain for .ch and .li, and we also make sure that is secure. And I'm from the security awareness team, or human-centered security team, as we now like to call ourselves. And my job is I do a lot of security advocacy. What does that mean? I talk to people about why security is important, and I also do a lot of work talking to people like you who probably have a technical background, saying why human-centered security is really important and how, in a bigger picture, we can actually win the hearts and minds. I don't know, who saw Ida's talk earlier? Anyone, hands up? Okay, we have a few. I'm really glad because a lot of the concepts she was mentioning, I don't have to mention again. Well, maybe I have to because not everyone saw it, but I'm totally with her on purpose and driving purpose for security. We also do events and training for practitioners, but also for end users. We talk a lot at conferences. We act as expert voices in media outlets. And we also have security awareness adventures, which are basically serious games. So we have things like an escape room. We do things like Dungeons and Dragons, but translated to the security world and to social engineering. So role-based training games and loads of other things. And if you're interested, do come and speak to me later. Now, our agenda. Very quickly, I want to propose 4 topics. So I just want to quickly look at new threats. I think I'm not an expert in, new AI threats, but I just want to pick out 2 main points that I think are really important. I want to look at the mitigation practices, mitigating human risk so far, the good examples and the not and very common examples, and the mitigation practices that I think are really failing. With a lovely story of Julia, who is actually someone I know, but I changed her name. And at the very end, I just want to let you go to the coffee break with a very simple solution, because I really love simple ideas. They might not always be so easy to bring them to organizations, but simple concepts, I think, are beautiful. Okay, so this morning we had AI revolution. I really want to kind of be on the same page with you on this. What is actually the impact of AI? You know, in the real world. Do you think AI has already changed the world? Yes or no? Yeah? I would just suggest Hurricane Milton, you know, all the disinformation. That was pretty real, right? The effects of that. So that has changed stuff. Do you think the threat landscape has changed since the introduction of AI, and more specifically Gen AI being so widely available? Yeah, we agree on this. So it's become much cheaper to generate really targeted attacks against humans with Gen AI, right? Yeah, okay. And would you also agree that we're not quite ready for it, and that we should maybe reconsider the ways in which we address the human element? Yeah? Okay, we all agree on that. Great. I manipulated you. I asked you 4 questions where you had to answer with yes, and you went with me. Great. Thank you. Another little experiment. I will get back to that. Okay. Very quickly, AI, what does that mean to mitigating human risk, or what kind of new threats do we have? As I said, it's always a bit strange to talk of human hacking. We're not actually hacking humans into pieces, but I also think of this, I'm sorry. But what I mean is we see, so before Gen AI, it was a lot more costly to have these targeted attacks. Now it's become very cheap, and they're very hard, or if not, depending on what kind of attack, to detect for people. And the problem, of course, is, we all know this, for years, the majority of data breaches involve the human element. If we look at the Verizon data breach report, this number goes up and down between like 85 to 74% of all data breaches, right? So this is actually the biggest risk for all of us, okay? This is the ENISA threat report talking about social engineering, and I really want to mainly focus on this topic of social engineering. So we've seen since the introduction, so this is the latest report, so this is last year, we really see an increase. The good news is, if we look at the OBehave report, which is by CyberSafe and the Cybersecurity Alliance, and they poll a lot of people on their opinion on cybersecurity, people are actually, and this is just the common person in the street, people are concerned about AI-related cybercrime. So this is great news for us, right? So people actually know about this, people worry about this, and equally, the Voice of the CISO report by Proofpoint, the 24 report, also says that CISOs really believe that people in general do get the grasp that they should do something about security, or this is important, but they all have this feeling that most of their people actually lack the skills and the knowledge and the tools required to defend their organization's data. And when asked about how they will deal with this, most of the CISOs said, well, we want to use AI to protect against the people problem. So basically, we want to use AI to fight AI. And I think, and this is kind of a two-sided thing, I completely agree to a certain degree. I don't agree to the idea that you can just run an automated program and then afterwards everyone knows about security. I don't think that works. However, I really do think we should use all the technology we have to defend our people, to make it as safe as possible for them to actually be online and work in the way they have to work, which is, not security, because they're not employed for doing security, they're employed for doing their jobs. So The second problem that I really want to focus on in terms of AI is what's real. Increasingly, we will have a very hard time to say what's real and what isn't. And I find this statistic quite interesting because the younger people sort of are feeling quite confident that they know how to detect AI-generated content. Now, this statistic is kind of on images and text, so it's all everything together. And I want to talk more about images, because I think that's where the real danger is, right? If you receive a video, or you think you're in a video conference and you see your colleagues, but it's actually all deep fakes, that is a really big problem, where I would assume most people would fall for it. So in an age where we can't distinguish between an image, whether it's real or not, that is generated by AI, we really have a problem. And these numbers I find really interesting. They're from a talk by a researcher who's developing automatic tools for deepfake detection. And she said this is actually a stat that is from a paper that is more or less a year old. So already we've really moved on from here. The quality of generated content is a much better. Untrained observers have a 50% chance in like a minute to recognize whether something is real or not. And the really bad news is that only 60% of the times trained users with unlimited time were able to say this is actually a fake, right? So what does that mean? And this is kind of last year, and it's exploding. So we have no chance. We have no chance when we say, okay, people, these are the rules. Watch out for the shadow, watch out for this, watch out for that, and then you'll be safe, then you'll be able to detect. That's not going to work anymore. So what I would suggest is, well, first of all, we need machines to fight machines, right? We need researchers like Luisa Verdoliva developing stuff that will defend, against this threat. And on the other hand, we need to give people a system that is proof. And the system that is proof against this is if you don't teach people to look at the link, look at the picture, look at this, look at that, you teach people the meta level. Are you still with me? Yeah? Okay. So before we move to the meta level, a little bit of suspense, I want to look at mitigation practices so far. So what we've seen in the lovely statistics beforehand, we do have some level of awareness, which is great. It means we've been shouting a lot of cybersecurity or IT security or information security or whatever, whichever way you want to say it. And I know they're not different things, but to the end user they are all the same things. We just shout that. But are we winning the hearts and minds of people with this? By saying, hey, it's important, cybersecurity really matters, it's important. Are we winning the hearts and minds of people? I'm not so sure. And even more so, in an age where, people are really being targeted, do they trust us? So if they have kind of a strange feeling about something, do they trust us? Do they come to us to report and say there's something strange? Do they feel that we are, as in we the security people, are their allies? And more importantly, is that the way you treat each other? Do you meet each other on eye level, or is it kind of a top-down, you do what I say? And this is a really old quote from 2015. The reason why I love this is it's almost 10 years old. And back then, this researcher said, hey, security education consists of repeating all policies and rules to everyone. And this is all the time, basically the megaphone. This is the equivalent of shouting louder at someone who does not understand your language. And we need a smarter, more targeted approach if we want to meaningfully change behavior. Unfortunately, this research hasn't really found the way into practice that much. Well, there are differences, of course, but why don't we have to look at behavior and behavior change? I have two models. This is a very simple one that we like to use, and it's linear. So what has to happen before we're willing and able to change our behavior? So first of all, we have to raise awareness. We have to say, hey, security is an issue. This concerns you. We draw people's attention to it. Next level, we need to, I've changed this. We need to educate and train people so that people actually have the knowledge and they also know how to do it. So they have the skill set. And the skill set means they actually know how to encrypt an email, not theoretically, but they've done it on their device. How many people know this? As in, of course, you know because you're in the field. But your normal user, they've watched an e-learning, that's it. Right? They can't actually do it on their machine with their program. So we're not teaching them skills, we're just making them aware and maybe, giving them knowledge, but we're not really teaching them how to do stuff. And so even if all of this, even if they would know how to do all this stuff, they still need to say, yeah, this is actually, I think security is important. It matters to, me, to my company, to, this is part of my job, which is quite difficult. And then only if all of this has happened in a good way can we actually change people's behavior. And the best way is if we make the desired behavior easy, if people repeat it all the time, and if we anchor it in their everyday life. Now, I want to move to a different model, which is basically similar but in a slightly different way, and this is the scientific version, that a lot of the interventions that are based on behavioral change, as in the psychology of behavioral change, is based on. It's the COM-B model, and it works basically, it's the same thing, right? So people need to be motivated. So this is where the communication part is important, where we say, hey, this really matters. This is part of your job, and you care about, or you should care about this, because your higher purpose in this company is not to, behave securely. No, it's because you're trying to save lives because you work in a hospital. To go with Ida's example. The capability is, of course, people need to be able to actually really do it. So they need to, know what a secure password is, and they also need to know and have a password manager and have all their passwords in there. And if they don't have it yet, they need to have the time and the skill that you need to teach them to get their passwords from, the horrible Excel file on their desktop into the password manager, and then hopefully also change all their passwords to make them unique and all the rest. And the password manager in this example is the opportunity part at the bottom of the model. And only if we have all these aspects, we can have the desired behavior that we're trying to achieve. And in my opinion, a lot of the times, maybe we have a bit of motivation in a lot of the security awareness programs, but very often we don't really go far enough with really empowering people and enabling people to really behave securely, because we're not teaching them the right skill set. And very often we also don't have the right processes in place and the right technical sort of setup to enable, to give people the opportunity to behave securely. And the opportunity part, I think, is probably the most neglected in the human-centered security research arena. This is the part about UX, right? I would love it if we would have a lot more UX people designing solutions that make it secure and, or rather safe for people to use. Where security by design doesn't mean, it's secure as in the technology is secure, but no, it actually means it's also safe to use. It's not easy to attack you as a person. Right. And now there's so although this is a great scientific model, and this is based on FOG, which is even earlier, 2003 is slightly different, but also the same. But the problem with this model assumes that behavior is the result of rational processes, and that's a problem, especially in the context of social engineering, because it doesn't really fully address the unconscious influences on behavior, right? And with a look to time, I'm going to skip over these 2 slides because they're not so important, but I want to look at the human OS, the human operating system. I'm talking technical language, can you tell? I'm targeting my audience. Are people rational most of the time? Yes, no? No, right? We know this at the latest ever since Daniel Kahneman's great book, The Behavioral Economist, who talks about, who's familiar with this concept? Yeah, okay, just very briefly, we have system 1 and system 2 thinking. And the reason why we have this, because it takes a lot of energy to think, especially to do really analytical thinking. That's the system 2. Most of the time, and this has served us well, and this is really, it's not a vulnerability, this is serving us well. Most of the time, we are in system 1. So, we go with a gut reaction because we've done it so many times, and this is great. Unless someone tries to target you, because they know how to target you. And this is a great book, The Psychology of Persuasion, I can't say that word, by Cialdini. Go check it out. This is basically what people learn who work in sales to influence people or manipulate people. And this is also what the criminals do. They're all experts at doing this. And there's actually a system, and it's really easy. I also have a talk just on that, so I will not dive into that further. But basically, if we teach people about how this is done, it's a lot easier to defend, right? Typical thing is like using fear, using authority, those kind of principles. They're called the compliance principles. Right, and the last one, and I will talk about this more, is a lovely book by Thaler and Sunstein. And I'm not going to talk about the nudging part, because that's kind of also quite complicated, and there's things that I also agree with Ida on that you can't use in security. But I will talk about their concept, about the metaphor, about the elephant and the rider. So now you're probably thinking, whoa, what is this? How is this related to cybersecurity or to the human? Well, they argue that actually the kind of whole system 1 thinking is the elephant. So the elephant represents our automatic, emotional, and instinctive responses, right? And the rider is the rational side. And if you look at this, the relation of it, right? The elephant is so much stronger, so much bigger, so much harder to control. And the problem is that all our training efforts only target the rider. And if the elephant gets attacked, it just starts chasing into whatever direction, and we're basically lost. So, what can we do about it? Well, I will talk about Julia and use the example of what we're doing currently to do this. And I'm running out of time. Slowly. Then I won't talk about fear because, actually, I do have to make the side note. So if we use fear as messaging, we're also targeting the elephant. And this is a really bad idea because fear as such, if we think back to, Stone Age times, fear is so that we respond, the adrenaline gets rushing and that we start running. Now, if we're trying to say, what we need is someone to be rational and analytical, we don't want fear. And also, if we work with fear, and there's actually quite a lot of science on this, come and talk to me about this later, what you do when you work with fear. And you can get it right, but it's kind of a very, very, very narrow margin. And what usually happens is people are so confused, so scared, so anxious about cybersecurity. We know people are aware this is a risk. They just tend to ignore it. It's kind of like telling a smoker you will die of cancer. They're like, yeah, whatever, I'll just ignore it and walk away. Okay, Julia. So she works in a company. She's quite successful. And, I talk to her, from time to time, and she knows that I'm now in the business of security. And security awareness training. And so she comes up to me and says, yeah, you know, now we also do this thing at our company where they send out these phishing tests. And I say, oh, okay, interesting. And she says, yeah, you know, they're sort of, I don't know, they're trying to trick me, basically. That's what they're trying to do. But I don't really care because they're a bunch of weirdos, these IT people. And anyway, you know, I never really fall for it. So, you know, this is, would you agree, we have a huge problem of reputation and trust. You don't want to be conceived as a bunch of weirdos that, you know, doesn't really have any influence on your, you know, on your behavior. Then the next thing is I said, so, okay, so you never fall for it. How do you know? So how do you detect? And she says, well, you know, how do you detect it? Did they teach you how to read a link beforehand? And she looks at me and goes like, what do you mean, read a link? I'm like, well, do you know how to read a URL? I wouldn't say URL because that's too technical. Do you know how to read a link? And she said, like, I don't really know what you mean. And so I tell her, you know, this is how you read a link. She said, like, oh, no, I've never heard of that. I'm like, okay, so do they teach you, you know, the extensions, like what kind of file? She's like, no. I'm like, okay. And then I say, well, how do you know? And she's like, well, you know, it's my gut feeling. And I'm saying, okay, so you trust your gut feeling whether to click or not to click on the link? And she's like, yeah, and it works. And I'm like, okay, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. And then I'm thinking, and I will jump over this slide, and then I'm thinking, well, actually, maybe this is, I have to also not, I can't tell you the phishing studies, maybe this is a really good way. Because maybe what she means is not actually the link itself. What she actually means is that she has a gut feeling that whatever is written in the email kind of tells her something about that, you know, she shouldn't do the action. And this is what human-centered security research has actually found out. If we move to the meta level, and we teach people something very, very simple and basic that applies to whatever channel the messaging is coming in, right? We don't want to focus on email. We also have calls. We have, you know, MS Teams. We have whatever. If we tell people to slow down every time something comes in with urgency and requires action, we have a much better chance that people will actually react. And in the earlier slides that I didn't have time to show you, the latest research on phishing actually is very clear that phishing is an attention problem. And I would very much agree to it on a certain level. And so this paper is amazing. These people really have to be congratulated because they found out that with the rule-based training, you know, where you basically teach people, this is a link, blah, 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 this is what you do, they had 42% fewer clicks. But with mindfulness training, which is basically saying, okay, every time there's another study, follow-up study, every time someone requires an action from you, especially with urgency, or that makes you particularly curious or makes you feel a lot, slow down and frown. And this paper, it was also really interesting. They did a little research where they had this emoji, this emoji in there, rather than saying, hey, this comes from an external source. They basically had this every time the email contained an attachment or a link, and they had considerable success. And now my last point is really to go back to the simple idea and say, okay, so why don't we teach the rider? Well, first of all, we probably have to tell some riders that there is something like an elephant, because maybe a lot of people are not aware and they think they're completely rational. So we have to teach them to watch out for all the different things that can target the elephant and how to deal with the situation. And it's beautiful because it's very simple, it's very human, it works on a very human level, and it works on whatever channel. And for the problems that I was saying with like the images and everything, we really need the machines to fight the machines. And I think with that, it's time to let you go to the coffee break, and I will just And on this slide, because this is important to me, we have a new course up for basically human-centered security that we co-developed with the ZHAW. Look at the curriculum. This is really a great course where I'll also be partly teaching and I'll also be partly joining all the classes that I don't have knowledge, because I also don't have the deep knowledge that I would like to have in certain areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cornelia. Very important topic, and I guess we can all learn a lot about the studies and the results. I would like to ask the audience, is there a question? Because actually time is up, but if there's one, then I would like to have it. Yes, in the first row. Can you just tell it? And the microphone is there. Great.
So we had a case where we really needed urgent answer from a lot of users.
Sorry.
And we sent them an email, hey, urgent, please answer till today, go to this link and confirm. And unfortunately, everyone clicked on, hey, this is phishing, right? It must be phishing because it has urgency, it has a link in it and so on. How you can prevent that? Because sometimes something is urgent.
This is a really interesting one. I love this question. So you're basically saying, so we from the IT department told people that this is really urgent and that they now have to do something. What did they have to do? The action they had to do? Change a password?
No, it was in Microsoft Forms, confirm something.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I mean, this is the part where, you know, the model about the processes, like the opportunities. The question is, do you really want to design emails like that? Because this is the most common scam as well, right? So maybe there's a different way of approaching this. Do you see what I mean?
Question would be how, yeah?
Yeah, completely agree.
I think the users educated you in letting you know this is bad habit to send such email.
Sure, it was not the best. I mean, we sent like 3 reminders months ago, then weeks ago, no one reacts. So then at some point we wrote an urgent email at the end, right? So,
but I mean, a different way. So in a company context, right?
Yes.
A very different way would be, so if this is something that really requires action for everyone, why don't you go to the team leads and say, hey, can you please communicate it and make sure that people know we'll be sending this, and maybe send it via 2 different channels, right? If you have 2 different channels, then people will maybe also, you know, or you can make it a rule, for example, to make it more legit. Or, you know, I had this question before where people say, well, but this is how we tell our people to change their password every half a year, which is a really awful idea anyways, where I'm saying, so sorry, what do you expect? When people click on this, you know, on the scam, change your process.
Okay, thank you.
And be creative with it. Yeah.
All right, Cornelia, thank you so much. And